You have heard it before, sometimes spoken, sometimes only felt in the silence between words. You're not like other women. It is often said as a compliment, yet it carries a deeper truth that few dare to examine. Being different is not merely about taste, habits, or personality. It is about presence. It is about a woman who has stepped into herself so fully that her energy no longer asks for permission. And when a woman reaches that state, something subtle but powerful happens in the people around her, especially in men who have not yet confronted their own inner world. What they feel is not dislike. It is intimidation, not because she is loud, demanding, or aggressive, but because she reflects back to them the parts of themselves they have avoided. This is not a story of arrogance or superiority. It is a story of psychological contrast, of what happens when one person is awake and another is still asleep. Self-awareness is not a trait you display, it is a state you inhabit. When it awakens within a person, it quietly rearranges their entire inner world. Thoughts stop running blindly. Emotions are no longer enemies to be suppressed or storms to be feared. They become signals, messengers carrying meaning. A self-aware woman does not react first and understand later. She understands while feeling. This alone sets her apart in a world where most people live fragmented, thinking one thing, feeling another, doing a third. Her wholeness becomes visible, not because she announces it, but because it cannot be hidden. When such a woman enters a relationship or even a room, she brings with her an invisible mirror. This mirror does not judge. It does not accuse. It simply reflects. And reflection is uncomfortable for those who have spent their lives avoiding their inner truth. Many people move through life distracted by noise, ambition, pleasure, validation, anything that keeps them from sitting alone with themselves. Self-awareness removes that escape. When someone encounters it in another person, especially someone emotionally close, the reflection begins whether they want it or not. Imagine a simple, real situation. A disagreement arises. Most people instinctively defend, deny, or deflect. A self-aware woman pauses. She listens not only to the words spoken, but to the emotions beneath them. She recognizes her own triggers without projecting them outward. She can say, calmly and clearly, "This made me feel unheard," instead of, "You always do this." That sentence may sound gentle, but its impact is profound. It leaves no room for manipulation or confusion. It asks the other person to meet her in honesty. And for someone who has never learned to be honest with themselves, that request feels like pressure. Psychologically, this is because awareness collapses illusion. When a man has built his identity on avoidance, avoiding vulnerability, accountability, or emotional depth, being seen clearly threatens the structure he depends on. He may not consciously understand what is happening. He only knows that around her, his usual strategies no longer work. He cannot charm his way out, dominate his way through, or disappear without consequence. The mirror follows him, not because she chases him, but because awareness does not turn off. Self-aware people also have a different relationship with fear. They feel it, but they are not governed by it. They know where it comes from: childhood conditioning, past wounds, unmet needs. Because of this, fear does not masquerade as anger, control, or indifference. It remains what it is. This emotional transparency can feel deeply unsettling to someone who has spent years pretending not to be afraid. Her calm acknowledgement of fear highlights his denial of it. Again, the mirror does its work. Research in emotional intelligence consistently shows that individuals who can identify and regulate their inner states tend to destabilize rigid hierarchies in relationships. Why? Because control thrives on confusion. When one person is unclear about their feelings, they are easily led, influenced, or overpowered. Clarity removes that leverage. A self-aware woman does not need to guess what she feels, so no one else gets to define it for her. This is often mistaken for arrogance or coldness, when in truth it is simply inner alignment. In everyday life, this dynamic appears subtly. She does not over-explain herself. She does not argue in circles. She does not chase reassurance when something feels wrong. She trusts her internal signals. To someone who relies on external validation or emotional chaos to feel significant, this steadiness feels like distance, even superiority. But it is neither. It is self-possession. The mirror effect becomes strongest in intimacy. Intimacy demands presence. Presence demands awareness. When a man moves closer to a woman who knows herself, his own inner world becomes louder. Old insecurities surface. Unresolved grief finds cracks to emerge. Questions he has avoided, about purpose, worth, and authenticity begin to whisper. She did not create these questions. She merely removed the distractions that kept them silent. This is why intimidation often shows itself not as fear, but as withdrawal, sudden emotional distance, defensiveness, minimization, sometimes even criticism disguised as humor. You think too much. You're too intense. Why can't you just relax? These are not observations, they are confessions. They reveal discomfort with depth, not flaws in the person who embodies it. There is also a deeper layer at work. A self-aware woman integrates both strength and softness. She is not split between personas. She can be compassionate without being weak, assertive without being cruel. This integration challenges outdated inner beliefs about gender, power, and control. For someone who unconsciously associates strength with dominance and vulnerability with weakness, her existence feels paradoxical and therefore threatening. She cannot be categorized easily, and what cannot be categorized cannot be controlled. Importantly, self-awareness does not make her perfect. She still makes mistakes. She still feels pain. The difference is that she takes responsibility for her inner life. She does not outsource her healing. This independence often triggers insecurity in those who depend on being needed to feel valuable. When she does not require rescuing, fixing, or managing, the familiar role disappears, and with it, the sense of purpose some derive from it. Yet the mirror she offers is not cruel, it is an invitation to wake up, to turn inward, to integrate the parts of oneself that have been rejected or ignored. Some accept this invitation and grow. They find that her presence becomes a catalyst for their own development. Others refuse it. They retreat into distraction, ego, or blame. In both cases, the mirror remains neutral. It does not chase approval. It does not soften its reflection. If you recognize yourself in this description, understand that the discomfort you provoke is not a measure of your worth, but of your coherence. You are whole in a fragmented world, and wholeness always stands out. Awareness cannot make itself small without betraying itself. It can only be lived. To be self-aware is to walk through life illuminated from within. Not loudly, not aggressively, but unmistakably. Those who are ready to see will see themselves more clearly in your presence. Those who are not will feel exposed. And that exposure, though often mislabeled as intimidation, is simply the soul encountering truth for the first time. Emotional independence is not the absence of love, nor is it a refusal of connection. It is the state in which love no longer comes from fear. It begins the moment a person realizes that their sense of self does not rise and fall with another's approval. From that realization, something profound shifts inside. The inner world becomes steadier, less reactive, less desperate for reassurance. A woman who reaches this state does not withdraw from intimacy, she enters it freely. And freedom, to those accustomed to control, feels like a threat. Many power dynamics in relationships are invisible, yet they shape everything. One person gives more, waits more, fears loss more. The other senses this imbalance and, consciously or not, leans into it. Control does not always look like dominance. Often it appears as emotional distance, unpredictability, or withholding affection. When someone's self-worth depends on being chosen, they tolerate this imbalance. Emotional independence ends that cycle quietly but completely. A woman who is emotionally independent still cares deeply, but her caring is not bargaining. She does not sacrifice her dignity to preserve connection. If something hurts, she acknowledges it. If something repeatedly disrespects her, she leaves. Not with rage, not with drama, but with clarity. This clarity unsettles those who rely on emotional leverage to feel secure. When guilt, silence, or inconsistency no longer work, power dissolves. Consider a familiar real-life scenario. A man grows accustomed to being pursued. He withdraws, knowing the other person will step forward. He delays responses, postpones commitment, keeps options open. This pattern continues until he meets a woman who does not chase. When he pulls back, she does not fill the silence with anxiety. She continues living. The absence of pursuit is not a tactic, it is authenticity. For the first time, his behavior produces no emotional reward. The dynamic collapses. Psychological studies on attachment styles reveal that secure individuals, those with emotional independence, are often perceived as intimidating by avoidant or anxious partners. Why? Because they do not reinforce insecurity. They neither cling nor flee. They respond rather than react. This balance removes the familiar push-pull rhythm many mistake for passion. Without that rhythm, unresolved inner instability becomes visible. Emotional independence also redefines choice. When a woman knows she can survive loss, love becomes a decision rather than a necessity. She chooses a partner not to complete her, but to walk alongside her. This choice is deeply confronting for someone whose identity depends on being needed. If he cannot save her, impress her, or emotionally dominate her, he must meet her as an equal. Equality, for someone raised on hierarchy, feels like loss of power. In daily interactions, this independence appears subtle. She does not over-explain her boundaries. She does not threaten to leave to be taken seriously. Her words carry weight because they are backed by action. If she says she will walk away, she does. This consistency builds self-trust, and self-trust is magnetic and destabilizing at the same time. Those who rely on manipulation feel exposed. Those who value honesty feel safe. There is also grief in this transformation. Emotional independence often emerges from pain, from moments where love was given freely but not returned, from lessons learned the hard way. A woman who has cried alone and still chosen to stand back up carries a quiet strength. She no longer confuses endurance with loyalty. She understands that love without respect erodes the soul. This understanding hardens nothing, it clarifies everything. Old power dynamics depend on fear, fear of abandonment, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. Emotional independence dissolves these fears by facing them directly. When a woman has already met her loneliness and survived it, threats of distance lose their force. Silence no longer punishes her. Withdrawal no longer controls her. The one who once held power through absence suddenly feels irrelevant. This shift often triggers resistance. A man may accuse her of being cold, detached, or selfish. But emotional independence is not coldness. It is warmth without dependency. It is love that does not beg. It is presence without self-erasure. These accusations reveal discomfort with a woman who cannot be emotionally cornered. There is also a deeper psychological layer. Power dynamics are often inherited, learned in childhood, reinforced in culture, normalized in media. Many men grow up believing they must lead emotionally by withholding, by staying one step ahead, by never needing too much. When they encounter a woman who leads herself, that script fails. They are forced to confront their own emotional illiteracy. Not everyone welcomes that confrontation. Yet emotional independence is not about winning or dominating. It is about restoring balance. When both people are emotionally whole, power becomes irrelevant. There is no need to control what is not feared. There is no need to cling to what is freely given. But this level of connection requires maturity. It requires two people who can stand alone and still choose together. If you embody emotional independence, understand this: the intimidation others feel is not caused by your detachment, but by your freedom. You remind them that love can exist without captivity, that connection does not require self-betrayal, that walking away can be an act of self-respect, not failure. You are not breaking relationships, you are breaking illusions. You are not rejecting intimacy, you are redefining it. Old power dynamics collapse in your presence because they cannot survive without fear. And when fear leaves, only truth remains. There comes a moment in every life when a quiet decision is made, often without words, often without witnesses. It is the moment you realize that shrinking has never truly protected you, that becoming smaller did not bring love, safety, or belonging. It only brought exhaustion. To dim your light in order to be accepted is not humility, it is a slow erasure of the self. And the soul always resists erasure, even when the mind tries to justify it. From an early age, many learn that acceptance is conditional. Be agreeable, be less intense, be quieter about your dreams, don't take up too much space. These lessons are rarely taught directly. They are absorbed through reactions, silences, and subtle rewards. When you soften your truth, you are praised. When you stand firmly in it, you are corrected. Over time, the psyche learns to associate authenticity with risk. Yet what is rarely acknowledged is the cost of this bargain. Each time you dim your light, something inside you withdraws. Confidence weakens, joy becomes cautious, the inner voice grows faint. A woman who refuses to dim her light is not trying to dominate a room, she is simply refusing to disappear within it. Her presence is not loud, but it is solid. She speaks when something matters. She does not apologize for existing fully. This alone disrupts environments built on unspoken hierarchies. When others have survived by blending in or pleasing authority, someone who stands clearly in themselves feels like a challenge, even if she makes no demands at all. In real life, this often unfolds quietly. A A woman shares an idea at work without over-explaining or seeking permission. She expresses a boundary in a relationship without anger or justification. She declines situations that drain her energy without guilt. None of these actions are aggressive, yet they are frequently met with discomfort. Why? Because her behavior exposes the silent compromises others have made with themselves. Her light illuminates what they have chosen to dim. Psychological research on self-expression consistently shows that individuals who live congruently with their values experience higher levels of well-being, even when facing social resistance. But congruence also creates contrast. When someone witnesses authenticity they have denied themselves, the reaction is rarely neutral. It is admiration, resentment, or both. Often it appears as subtle criticism. You've changed. You think you're better than everyone else. These statements are not assessments of character. They are expressions of unease. Dimming the light is often mistaken for kindness. Many believe that making others comfortable is a moral responsibility. But comfort achieved through self-suppression is not kindness. It is self-abandonment. True compassion does not require self-erasure. In fact, the more integrated and alive a person is, the more genuine their compassion becomes. When you are not busy managing how you are perceived, you are free to actually see others. There is also a deep connection between light and truth. Light reveals. It brings clarity. It shows edges and shadows alike. This is why environments built on pretense feel threatened by those who live openly. A woman who does not dim her light asks no one to change, yet her presence challenges false harmony. She does not maintain peace by swallowing her truth. She understands that peace built on silence is fragile and often false. Consider relationships where one partner consistently makes themselves smaller to avoid conflict. Over time, resentment grows. The relationship survives, but the self deteriorates. When that person finally begins to speak honestly, they are accused of disrupting stability. But what they are truly disrupting is stagnation. Growth always looks like disruption to systems that depend on suppression. Culturally, women are often praised for adaptability rather than authenticity. The ability to mold oneself to expectations is rewarded. But adaptability without a core leads to fragmentation. The self becomes divided, one part presented to the world, another hidden in private. A woman who refuses this division becomes whole. And wholeness is powerful not because it seeks power, but because it cannot be easily manipulated. This refusal to dim one's light is often born from suffering. Many only arrive at it after years of being misunderstood, minimized, or overlooked. At some point, the pain of self-betrayal outweighs the fear of rejection. That moment marks a psychological shift. Approval is no longer the currency. Integrity becomes the standard. There is a quiet courage in continuing to shine when it would be easier to fade. It means accepting that not everyone will stay. Some will leave because your light makes their shadows visible. Others will attempt to dim you, subtly or directly, because your clarity disrupts their control. But there will also be those who are drawn closer, who feel safer and more alive in your presence because you give them permission to be themselves. To not dim your light is not to demand attention. It is to stand in alignment with who you are, regardless of who approves. It is to let your voice carry its natural tone, to let your intelligence, depth, and emotion exist without apology. This authenticity does not harden the heart, it strengthens it. When you stop dimming your light, you may lose certain connections, but you gain yourself. And the self, once reclaimed, becomes a source of quiet radiance. Not everyone will understand it. Not everyone will welcome it, but those who are meant to walk with you will recognize it not as threat, but as truth. Depth is not something that announces itself. It does not enter a room demanding attention or validation. It arrives quietly, carrying a weight that cannot be ignored by those who are sensitive to inner truth. A person with depth has lived inwardly. They have felt emotions fully rather than skimming over them. They have sat with discomfort instead of running from it. This inner familiarity creates a presence that is both calming and unsettling at the same time. Calm for those who recognize themselves within it, unsettling for those who have spent their lives avoiding what lies beneath the surface. When you carry depth, you invite others into a psychological space they may not be prepared to enter. Your questions are not casual. Your silences are not empty. Your listening is not passive. You hear what is being said and what is being avoided. This awareness does not come from judgment, but from experience. And because of this, People often feel seen around you in ways they are not accustomed to. To be seen is a gift, but only when one is ready for it. In everyday life, this dynamic unfolds in subtle ways. A conversation that might remain light with others becomes more reflective with you. Someone finds themselves speaking about fears they usually keep hidden. Or, conversely, they grow restless, distracted, eager to change the subject. Neither reaction is accidental. Your depth alters the emotional temperature. It slows things down. It removes the usual escape routes. And in that slowing, unresolved material begins to stir. Psychologically, what surfaces are the parts of the self that were pushed away long ago, the disappointments never grieved, the anger deemed unacceptable, the vulnerability mistaken for weakness. These parts do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They wait. And when someone with depth enters a person's life, the waiting ends. The inner world responds, often without conscious permission. This is why depth is so often misinterpreted. A man may say you are too intense or too serious, when what he is actually experiencing is the discomfort of his own unexamined emotions. He may feel drawn to you at first, sensing something real, something meaningful. But as closeness increases, so does inner pressure. Your presence does not create his fear, it reveals it. And revelation is frightening when one has no tools to face what is revealed. Depth also carries stillness. You are not in a hurry to fill silence. You do not rush to fix emotions or distract from them. This stillness acts like a mirror. In silence, the psyche speaks. Thoughts grow louder. Feelings demand attention. Many people fear silence because it confronts them with themselves. Around someone with depth, silence becomes unavoidable, and so does self-awareness. There is a reason people often project onto those who carry depth. Projection is a defense. When inner conflict arises, it is easier to locate the discomfort outside oneself. You become the problem. You are labeled complicated, difficult, or overwhelming. But these labels say more about the speaker than the one they are applied to. Depth does not complicate life, avoidance does. Depth simply refuses to participate in emotional numbness. In relationships, this dynamic intensifies. Intimacy requires emotional exposure. A person with depth does not skim the surface of connection. They seek meaning, honesty, and emotional truth. They ask questions that go beyond roles and routines. They want to know what someone feels, fears, and dreams when no one is watching. For someone who has built their identity on performance or control, this kind of intimacy feels like danger. Their inner contradictions are no longer hidden. The shadow steps forward. The shadow is not evil. It is the rejected self. It contains qualities that were deemed unacceptable or unsafe to express. Anger that had no place to go. Tenderness that was mocked. Desire that felt forbidden. Depth invites these dissound parts back into awareness. And awareness demands responsibility. This is where resistance arises. To acknowledge the shadow is to admit complexity. To admit complexity is to relinquish simple narratives about oneself. Not everyone is ready for that loss. There are moments when your depth will awaken longing. Someone may feel inspired by your emotional courage, your capacity to hold pain without collapsing. They may sense that life could be richer, more meaningful, if they allowed themselves to feel as you do. This longing can be transformative, or it can turn into resentment. If they believe they cannot access that depth within themselves, they may turn against the reminder of it. Depth also carries empathy, but not indulgence. You understand pain, yet you do not excuse cruelty. You recognize wounds, yet you do not allow them to justify harm. This balanced stance is particularly confronting to those who rely on their suffering to escape accountability. Your presence says, without words, that healing is possible and therefore required. Living with depth means accepting that not everyone will stay. Some will step back because your presence makes their inner world too loud. Others will cling, hoping you can carry what they refuse to face. Neither is your responsibility. Depth is not a burden to be managed. It is a truth to be lived. If you have ever wondered why people react strongly to you, why they either open up suddenly or withdraw completely, this is why. You do not merely occupy space, you activate it. You do not merely listen, you invite revelation. And revelation, though necessary for growth, is rarely comfortable. Your depth is not something to soften or apologize for. It is the result of living honestly with yourself. It is the quiet strength that comes from facing darkness and not turning away. Those who are ready will find healing in your presence. Those who are not will feel exposed. In both cases, your depth serves its purpose. Authenticity is not a performance, nor is it a trait adopted for approval. It is the quiet alignment between what you feel, what you think, and how you live. When a person reaches this alignment, their presence carries an invisible demand, not spoken, not enforced, yet deeply felt. The demand is growth, not because they ask others to change, but because their way of being reveals what is possible when one stops betraying the self. This revelation unsettles those who are still negotiating with their own truth. Most people live divided lives. They present one version of themselves to the world and keep another hidden away, even from themselves. This division is often learned early, shaped by the need to belong, to survive, to be loved. Over time, the divided self becomes normal. Comfort grows around pretense. Authenticity, when encountered, disrupts this comfort. It does not attack it, but it exposes it, and exposure demands a response. A woman who lives authentically does not announce her values, she embodies them. She does not argue about integrity, she practices it. Her words match her actions, her boundaries match her needs. This consistency creates psychological tension for those who rely on inconsistency to avoid accountability. Around her, excuses feel hollow. Half-truths lose their protection, not because she confronts them, but because she does not participate in them. In everyday relationships, this often appears as discomfort. A man may feel drawn to her clarity, her emotional honesty, her grounded presence. At the same time, he may feel pressure, an unspoken sense that staying close to her would require him to become more conscious, to reflect, to communicate honestly, to confront habits he has normalized but never questioned. This pressure is not imposed, it is perceived. Her authenticity acts as a measuring line against which his own self-deception becomes visible. Growth is frightening because it requires loss. One must let go of familiar identities, defenses, and narratives. Authenticity accelerates this process. When someone chooses to live truthfully, they collapse the distance between who they are and who they pretend to be. This collapse is liberating for them, but destabilizing for those who remain divided. The contrast is stark. One person is integrated, the other is fragmented. The tension between these states cannot be ignored. Psychological research on congruence shows that individuals who live in alignment with their inner values experience greater resilience and emotional stability. But this stability can be misinterpreted by others as rigidity or emotional distance. In reality, it is the opposite. Authentic people feel deeply. They simply do not abandon themselves to manage others' reactions. This self-loyalty is confronting in a culture that rewards self-sacrifice for acceptance. Authenticity also removes negotiation. There is no hidden agenda, no strategic self-betrayal to maintain connection. A woman who is authentic will not stay where she must shrink, lie, or numb herself. She will not mold herself to fit expectations that violate her inner truth. This refusal forces a choice in others' rise to meet her in honesty or retreat into comfort. Many choose retreat, then label the experience as intimidation. There is a quiet grief that accompanies authenticity. You begin to see where relationships were sustained not by love, but by shared avoidance. When avoidance is no longer available to you, those connections dissolve. This can feel lonely, even painful. But it is a necessary loss. What remains after illusion falls is something real, something sturdy enough to support growth on both sides. In romantic relationships, authenticity removes the fantasy phase quickly. There is no prolonged performance, no delayed revelation of true needs. This can feel abrupt to someone who enjoys the safety of gradual disclosure and plausible deniability. Around an authentic woman, the question is no longer, do you like me? But, can I be honest with myself? That is a far more demanding question. Authenticity also challenges control. Control thrives on ambiguity and self-doubt. When a woman trusts herself, control loses its leverage. She does not require permission to feel what she feels. She does not need validation to know what is right for her. This independence demands maturity from those who wish to stay close. Emotional games fail. Manipulation becomes visible. Only mutual respect remains viable. Yet authenticity is not harsh. It is grounded in compassion, beginning with compassion for the self. An authentic woman understands her flaws. She acknowledges her wounds. She does not pretend to be complete or superior. This honesty invites growth not through shame, but through example. She shows that it is possible to face one's inner world without collapsing, that one can evolve without self-hatred. Those who respond to authenticity with hostility are often responding to their own stalled development. They sense that staying the same is no longer an option in her presence. Something must change, and change, when resisted, becomes threat. It is easier to label her as demanding than to admit fear of growth. If your authenticity has cost you comfort, approval, or familiarity, it has not failed you. It has done exactly what it is meant to do. It has aligned you with your own becoming. Growth is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is the steady unfolding of truth lived daily. Your authenticity does not demand growth with force. It demands it by existing. If you have ever been told you are not like other women, understand this: your difference is not a flaw to be softened. It is a signal. Intimidation is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is often proof that you are doing something right. You are not responsible for shrinking yourself to protect someone else from their own reflection. Your task is simpler and braver than that. Remain whole, remain conscious, remain true. Those who are ready will rise to meet you. Those who are not will fall away. And both outcomes are acts of truth.